Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Ang.
And I'm Cinda Kay.
Welcome to our podcast, Superpower and Sidekick.
There was a Facebook meme today, or just those interactive questions that people put out there, and it's what superpower do you possess? That was the question. And there was a lot of really people had some lovely things to write, and I wrote the boring things. I'm psychic and telepathic and slightly teleportational.
Wow, those are quite superpowers.
Well, and in the media, they always portray people with those abilities as usually being the villain. So I'm glad that I've been doing a lot of my shadow work, and I've come out from being a villain in other people's false narratives. I was a scapegoat for many years. Um, but yeah, superpowers are real.
Yes, they are. And it's cool when you can use them.
Whenever I was young, I didn't know that I was telepathic, and I didn't realize not only was I reading other people's stuff on accident, it was also I was getting um, messages from invisible helpers. And I was getting divine guidance from a very young age. So I'm pretty sure I've done this before in a past life. Um, and it's just such a strange perception, because a lot of times when you hear it or when it comes through, whatever, it's your own voice, or you think it is. And it's just like whenever I have a psychic vision or any kind of a psychic touch in, it feels like it's actually me. It feels very first person. So it's just a little strange. And it's not always first person. I do sometimes actually feel things outside of myself with mediumship and some other things. But not always. Sometimes even in mediumship, I'm seeing it like it happened to me. So it's weird. I remember being in St. Louis, and I would sit there and having these thoughts about something. One time I was in a meditation, and I realized I was having all these thoughts about something I didn't know anything about.
Hmm.
And that was a realization, oh, wait a minute, this may not be my thought.
So how do you get to the point where you're feeling or sensing other people's thoughts?
Some of mine is I came in that way. So I'm
Is
a
that an ability that you can develop, like a normal person
I
can
think a lot of
develop?
people,
Or
I
no?
think there is a lot of people that are highly sensitive. It's HSP, highly sensitive person. Alanis Morissette actually talks about it openly. And a lot of times people are talking about, like me, I'm very chemically sensitive and environmentally sensitive. Not, I can walk outside and I don't get allergies. It's not anything natural world I'm fine with. It's the non-natural world and the synthetic world that I get really, really sick. And so HSPs have a little bit, it's like that canary in the coal mine, and they can sense things before everybody else might be able to. And I'm not saying that not everybody can have that, but I do think more people are apt to it than others. I was talking with a teacher friend of mine, Sienna, yoga teacher, and I said something about, oh, I don't, my left and my right, I always mess it up because I'm dyslexic. And she went into a wonderful, beautiful tirade about how if I had been living in an indigenous society, they would have seen that as a skill and brought me out and trained me to be a shaman. So I
Hmm.
do think I've got some things that are just, in that natural connection, but I absolutely believe that everybody can actually develop it too. And I say everybody relatively, but I know some dense people, but I do believe that they can, just maybe not this life. Okay, I believe everyone can, but change can happen. I do believe in human nature and people can change, but no, there's definitely people that are very 3D orientated, and they're not very aware of the multidimensional realities. And for some reason, I do have a keen eye, sometimes even more so than the physical world. I see the multidimensional world way more.
Hmm.
Like there's times I'm almost going through a tunnel with the physical realm because I'm in such a multi-dimensional realm. I remember walking through New York one time and I was actually having visions of what it was before there was a city there. And
Hmm.
I could see it and I was going into high frequency. I felt high, I felt a higher being, the guardian of that area. It was a very, very, very strong spiritual area long before they made it Manhattan.
Hmm.
And I could actually walk through and see, and it was a weird experience to do it. And I could see it before concrete. Um, but then later on, I was watching a movie. Oh, it was spiritual or Sorcerer's Stone. I think is was I know his name. I can see the picture, but I can't say it right now. But anyway, in the movie, there is a scene that he walks up to a door in New York City, and all of a sudden it flashes to like maybe the 1700s, and it shows something previous. And so not only was I seeing it like even prior to more the indigenous before the European community got here. But I also did see like in different times in different spaces. You know,
Hmm.
there's there's a reason why a lot of things happen in New York is because it is very much so a portal
Hmm.
spiritually.
So, how would someone tap into those portals if that's even possible?
It's absolutely possible. I think that's where we're heading next,
Hmm.
and that's why there is such a buzz around changing our frequency and working to raise our own frequency because we've learned that there is truth in that sound waves, light waves, everything in the physical existence that we know of, and even physicality is an energy wave. So I do believe everyone can tap into it. I don't believe everybody will. But I do think at some point, enough of us do that the veil is going to lift and it won't be as dense as it is today. It's almost an illusion, it's almost a hologram set over the place. And so you just start seeing through it.
I think that's a really cool superpower, but in a way, I think I would be kind of scared to see what's behind it.
I've questioned my sanity and if I was still in the reality or not before. I've questioned my sanity, you know, because some of the things that I've seen and I've felt, and especially some of the spiritual phenomenon that I've experienced, um, it took me a lot to really be able to wrap my mind about it because the only thing that's really taught about in this, mysticism is not taught. It is hidden. In fact, it's people tell you that it's evil and it's bad and it's all these kind of things, but it was also going to be the only thing that was going to explain my experience for me.
Hmm.
And I felt like that the information was like withheld from me because all the indigenous teachings were wiped out around the planet. All the things that could have told me that this is actually a part of Mother Nature and that we were conditioned out of being a part of Mother Nature, it would have changed my perspective. But because I'm in a world that doesn't necessarily believe in Mother Nature, I definitely had some cognitive dissonance in the beginning when things were really, really, really opening up. And I realized that I had an ability that not everybody was walking around with today.
So, what other superpower would you want to have?
Oh no, 1.5. I don't even think about that because I didn't want to have these. I had these and I had to learn how to manage them or else they were gonna like, I don't know, backfire and do something really. You know how we watch the Marvel movies? There was a sense of that I had to understand what I had because otherwise it was a curse until I learned how to use it and then it became a blessing. So I had to work at it. It was a discipline. It was something I wanted to expand in my life and to understand because it was so far out of the realm when I first started. And the words weren't even out in the world for me. The only word that was available for me is you're schizophrenic and you hear voices.
And therefore you should go to a mental institution.
Yeah, for reals.
Yeah.
But the voices kept being right, and they still are today. And it has been tested and tested and tested and tested, by me over the years. And I didn't trust it and believe it at first. It has definitely developed. It's a process. When people talk about it, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's very much true. It's about the journey of knowing yourself, and that we are multidimensional beings. We're not just physical, but we only have the knowledge of the physical aspects right now, really. And even what we do have with the spiritual is so limited, and really it's a lot more about conditioning than it is empowerment, in my experience. I'm not saying that other people haven't had another experience with that. I have had beautiful spiritual experiences within religion. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Absolutely, it can happen.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I got my tools there. In fact, I got more gaslighting there in the beginning than what I did help, because it was fear-based. Everyone was afraid of it. They'd been told that people like me are evil. And I don't believe I'm evil. But how many witches were burned? Ooh, we're getting into something deep here, and I think it's actually part of it. We're talking about, what's the difference between consciousness and conditioning? And I mean, come on, people that had consciousness at one time, they burned them all.
Yeah.
It can be kind of scary to have. And it was. I do have that. People, they've actually claimed the term is the witch wound. And I would definitely say I came in with that. So I had to really kind of overcome the fear, the conditioning, the conditioned fear, in order to access my superpowers and understand them in a way that wasn't fear-based, that was love-based. And that's just it. What I have, the more and more I've developed with it and worked with it, I realize it is the divine source reaching down for me with love. It is absolutely love-based. I've tested it inside and outside for myself, because I didn't want to align with anything evil, because I had been, I did have some of that religious conditioning, even though I wasn't big into religion. I mean, let's face it, we are in a Christian nation, and there's a lot of people preaching it all the time. We don't even have to go to church to hear it. So,
Yeah, no kidding.
and it messed with my head. I had to really work through it. And that's part of that is what had it as a curse first, because I had been given fear-based conditioning on it. So when we do start learning to access these superpowers, it can be difficult. It's like the whole world is against us to do it, or was. I do think we're constantly making, it's almost like there's two realities going on out there. They're backsliding into back when they were burning the witches. There's like half of duality is doing that right now, and the other half is actually moving forward and coming into consciousness themselves. And just in my experience and what I see out there, but I remember when I first started seeking spiritually, it was the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the things they talked a lot about, that before things came back into union, that everything was going to go into dualistic separation first.
Seems like that's what we're experiencing right now.
Exactly. It was like half the world is backsliding and half the world is moving forward. And I don't mean that across political divide. I really do not, because I see the political divide being part of that dualistic, not necessarily. This isn't about good guys, bad guys. That's not at all what this is about. It's beyond good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more of a fear-based way of looking at things and a love-based way of looking at things. And a lot of religion, because it came through humans, is way more fear-based than it is love-based. And I'm not saying that there aren't ones that are love-based. Hey, if you found your healing in religion, more power to you. I'm glad you have your support system. I don't see it as a bad thing, but I do see a lot of it still with some fear-based conditioning within it.
Well, I mean, a lot of the religion pretty much comes out to be the same. I mean, it's all about, love thy neighbor, right? That's the first
It's
thing.
I love the whole thing that every single popular religion on this planet has the same golden rule, basically. You know, you and I we've listened to interpreters enough that we know things. Little synopsis, it changes from each translation depending where you're on the planet, but it all comes down to the same thing. No, I think I definitely, I think all the cults are going to go away with this change. That we're not going to need religion so bad to define our world.
because we have it in us already.
As that multidimensional world actually opens to us, it's just not as scary to me. I know the universe has my back. It has shown me over and over and over again. Not that I don't get scared, but I don't stay there and wallow as bad.
So, how do you think we get out of all of this conditioning? I mean, I guess it's part of what we've been talking about is just
Raising our
connecting to the
frequency.
divine.
I do think that conditioning is lower frequency. Um, I want to have another podcast just on how spiritual entities, quote unquote, attachments go along with that. I don't think it's that they attach to us. I think we magnetize them because we're kinetic. So when we focus and keep a lower frequencies come to us. When we focus and really focus on a high frequency, we start getting that. So I do believe in order to live a divine-led supernatural life, we have to reach for it. Even though it came natural to me, I still had to make an effort and I had to choose it. We were talking before about choice. It's how we make choices for ourselves. I'm not chosen. I chose. I want to be yoked to the divine being, to the divine intelligence. I want that. I asked for that specifically to run my life. So I make effort every day in discipline to do that. And it does it hones it. It like turns your steel into, and makes it the blade sharp, and you become it is something. When we first learned how to use our third eye, for instance, some of the techniques that we were given was like, so that way we were going to the gym and doing a workout every day on that muscle. It's a muscle that we have to develop, or don't have to, but we choose to develop.
Well, instead of waiting for another podcast to talk about that, why don't you just talk about it now?
Well, there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of subterfuge also in the spiritual world. We all know that there are psychics that are not reputable out there. I mean, that's one reason I was so afraid to say I was psychic medium for so many years, is because there are people that have given it a bad name, really have charlatans. And I noticed that it's a hot topic for them to use. Oh, you have a spiritual attachment. You need to pay me $200 so I can remove that from you. I'm going to tell you, if you ever hear that, straight up, it's a lie, because they can't even disattach it from you. It's kinetic. It's energy based. And not that I do think some people can raise somebody's frequency long enough that it's gone for the moment, and you can help people clear things, but they generally have to be an active participant within that for it to actually work by raising their frequency. An attitude, having a piss poor attitude, is a really good way to get spiritual attachments. And all that fear-based stuff just runs right to you.
So, explain what spiritual attachment is, because I'm not clear.
When I came back from Vietnam and the Cambodian killing fields, I was a little perturbed in my brain for about 6 months. And I realized towards the end of that there was some lower frequencies that, rather than moving on the path of reincarnation, were still in my field creating chaos and depression and emotional baloney. that wasn't necessarily all mine, but the core of it was mine. And it's like playing a symphony. That's why we have to work on our own shadows, because then spiritual entities can't use those against us, per se. Our fear is our conditioning. Literally, our conditioning can be used against us in that spiritual vibrational world. So a spiritual attachment is a low frequency because we are vibrating at a low frequency, and energy is kinetic. So it attaches. It's like a magnet. And it sometimes, and that also creates a thick veil that it's hard for us to have conscious awareness when a lot of that kind of static, energetic static, is around us. So, but I don't, I don't think you can necessarily, you can go to a spiritual advisor and a spiritual person, psychic medium, and there are people that can absolutely help with that. But it's still about learning to attune your frequency. And I do think that most of the time, if someone magically takes them off, well, you're going to walk out of that room and you're going to think that old fear-based thought, and it's just going to come right back anyway. So I do think that part of adjusting our frequency is adjusting our attitude. As simple as that. Do we have a victim attitude? Well, you know what that's going to attract? Do we have an attitude against the man? Well, you're probably going to be in bankruptcy and have other life issues that go along with that attitude, for instance. So adjusting our attitude can actually help us to adjust our frequency.
Well, it's kind of like what you said before about what you focus on is what you
attract.
And so the more you focus on something, the more it comes to you.
And that's why there is truth to abundance mindset or poverty mindset. There is truth to that. Words are spells, thoughts are energy, and all of it matters. And a lot of people, including myself on certain days, walk through unconscious. And so whenever we do that, we literally are creating our world from our own fear-based, unconscious, conditioned mind. By raising our frequency, we choose to come into alignment with a higher divine source, divine intelligence, another way, rather than chaos just running around and we all end up chasing our tails. That's when you start moving forward in your life, for instance. I'm not saying that there aren't other ways. I'm sure there are atheists that can move forward in their lives just fine. I'm just saying that it's one way to do it. Is the way that I have found to do it. But but I do think that there is, because we are in a multi-dimensional reality, that there are all different frequencies, lower, middle, high frequencies. I do think that there are some that would do anything in the world to continue the status quo so they can work from the background and they can use people by using their fears against them. And I do see it happening. One reason I started seeking spiritually is I had a problem with possession that came through my family line. I was able to clear it in 2006, and I was able to finally become, and it was the first time in my life, or especially like 12 years old until that day, I felt sovereign for the first time. There were other times that I could tell there was shit trying to control my thoughts. It just wasn't all me. I would have thoughts that I'm not that bad of a person. I'm pretty sure that's not in my heart of hearts. And I would have those kinds of discernments going on. But at one point, I was able to tell that energy, no, you don't have the right to be here anymore. And I was able to I was strong enough spiritually to eclipse my energy bright, strong enough, high enough frequency that they literally couldn't attach to me anymore and manipulate my thoughts. So that's the reason I tell people, are you sure all your thoughts are your own? Or do you have a fear-based thought and somebody's feeding you even more? It's not necessarily somebody. It can be an actual frequency. It's just a look, and it's finding its outlet into the world through you. You know, what if we're all just channels to these energies? Are we choosing what we're channeling? Or are we just doing it unconsciously and the way we've been conditioned to do it? Have we taken the time to be sovereign? Huh?
How would we choose to channel it rather than unconsciously doing it?
Well, adjusting our frequency, adjusting our attitude, quit walking around in victim mentality, thinking that the world is against us, and believing everybody's fear-based crap that was shoved down our throat at some point in our life. You know, I reached out for a higher power and it reached back for me. So that's where I do understand religious when, you know, people, there is I do believe there's a force in this universe, and it's intelligent, and it's way more imaginative and solution seeking than I ever even dreamed of until I tapped into it. That's another thing. Low frequencies are always looking for the problem. They're not solution seekers. So, you know, if you get stuck in an attachment, we were talking earlier about getting stuck in ruts and, you know, getting like a dirt road that's been driven down too many rainstorms, and they get deeper and deeper and deeper if someone doesn't come in and fill the ruts. You have to actually literally go in and fill your own ruts, or else you're going to keep falling back into your own shit.
Oh, something's coming into my mind, but I can't grab it.
I felt like there was something, so I was trying to give you a moment.
It's there, I can't grab it. Boy.
We are swimming in frequencies. The multidimensional world is way more full. Thank goodness we don't all have sight in that. We'd probably be running, screaming, freaking out. But it is absolutely full of frequencies, and it's up to us which ones we choose to channel and what vibration, according to what vibration we choose.
So if someone wants to be more attuned, I guess, to the divine,
Exactly.
you recommend them like having like a certain habitual thing that they do every morning when they wake up, because a lot of times, you know, people are busy, they got to get ready for work, they
You
got to
think
get the
that
kids ready.
altars and ritual and ceremony, that kind of stuff, it amplifies our intention, and it helps us to remember to stay in intention rather than to stay in a conscious realm rather than functioning from the unconscious realm. You know, like when you drive 200 miles and go, oh, I forgot that drive. You know? How many times you've gone to work and you get to work and you're like, I don't remember my drive. You know, that we get in an unconscious and we're just going on. So I do think absolutely developing some kind of a spiritual practice, you know, like you and we used to, I say used to, I still continue, and you probably do some in your own ways, that we have little techniques that we do in the morning. I use energy. You know, I practiced several different energy techniques. Sometimes I'll just literally say, I want to connect to you, divine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can actually be that simple. It doesn't, there's a lot of people out there. This is the right way to do it. This is the wrong way to do it. That's the right way. No, there is no wrong way. Well, maybe there is, but making an effort is always valid. It always has its own worth and its own value. So just by reaching out to it, but one of the ways, because we are human and we forget and we get lost, is by creating a ritual or a ceremony or an altar that reminds you and it brings it back into mind. And I do all kinds of stuff to help me. In the beginning, I was even putting Post-it notes with affirmations
Mm.
around the room because I had so much itty bitty shitty committee that I needed to reprogram the computer of my brain that was just defaulting on the old programming and start layering over new programming and ones of my choosing rather than the ones of the conditioning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said before that it starts with intention. So as long as you have the intention.
I do think intention is there is a magic just in intention itself. You have sent out an energy into the universe that is already working the magic and bringing it to you. But the more that we can have intention with surrender, it's actually more powerful than if we try to micromanage it. Because then we get in the worry mind and we end up back in the itty bitty shitty committee and back in that loop, in that rut.
So I don't know how you meditate, but when I do it, I feel like I get distracted a lot. All these thoughts come in that I don't want there.
I think
So,
that's true for everybody. Even the most, because there are days I can meditate and I am in another world. I'm gone. In the conscious realm way. I've achieved the meditation. And there are other days, or even a moment within a day, that I cannot stop the monkey mind to save my life. And I think the more that we try to shove it into a bag, the more it's going to come back out. That's actually, and it's talked a lot in Buddhism and several other, like Hinduism and Buddhism are actually more of a spiritual practice than a religion, and people don't realize that. But it's not much different than praying in the morning as well, is that you are bringing your intention and bringing your awareness into that. Oh, but what I was going to say, you can't force it. Okay, there we go. The practice is to learn to be a witness. And you step back and it can all go in front of you, but you don't necessarily attach to it and say, that's my thought. That's my thought. Oh, I want to follow that worry. It's more that you can just let it, you have them, but you're not jumping and attaching to every single one of them. So it's a way to develop it. I don't think the brain isn't going to stop. The brain is a receiver and it's going to keep receiving. It's not going to stop receiving. So I think trying to stop it is actually going against our nature in some ways and creates frustrations. It's more of allowing to it and not attaching. So taking a different perspective and finding a witness perspective rather than a participant within that thinking realm. So it's more of a perspective than it is an actual thing. You're not going to stop your mind, so don't try. But there are techniques. One of those is to constantly, when the moment you realize you went off on a tangent, you just come back to your focus. You lose all your whole meditation the minute you start beating yourself up for following that thought, and your frequency goes back down. So while you're meditating, you catch yourself rather than beating yourself up because you were trained to do that. That's definitely conditioning. Be a little bit more kind to yourself. Oh, I followed that thought. I wanted to have the intention here, and just bring it back. Even if you have to do it 200 times. If nothing else, you're developing compassion for yourself, which is going to help, period. So it still makes a meditation. If you sit down in meditation and your time is not wasted, regardless if you achieve it or not. Sometimes your failure is exactly what leads to the next success. So we can't necessarily judge it because it's not just that moment. It's the whole of it over our lifetime. It's a practice rather than.
So when you say, okay, you're distracted by a thought and then you want to come back to it, how do you do it? Like, do you go back to nothingness? Like, just
I go
clear
back to my
your mind
chakra 7.
completely, or what?
I go back to my chakra 7 or 6 and 7. Because we were trained in chakras in the beginning, that
Hmm.
is still where I go because it worked right off.
Hmm.
I got lucky and that worked for me. So you bet I still use, and I use that now if I'm in conversation and it's not going well. I use that that's where I bring my focus. And it's a way just for me to say, allow the divine in to help this. So for myself, it's about the crown chakra and that third eye and actually using those within my meditation practice. And I actually use those as focal points within myself. And some days I'll use other chakras if I know I've been like really fear based about finances or something like that. I'm going to be very loving to my chakra one and that root chakra and making sure I'm grounded into this earthly realm. If she gave birth to me in this world, then there's a place for me. It's going to work out. I can, that's one of the things we've been so like plucked up that we forget we're a part of nature. We almost feel like a parasite, because we've been told we are, but we're not. And I know, I've had the Earth Mother actually reach out to me and show me how much I'm loved and that I'm welcomed back into that fold whenever I remember who I am. And that I don't have to believe someone's fear based thing that someone's going to eat my last piece of pie before I can get to it. That's all right. I know how to bake a new pie. I have abilities. I have skills. I can create that. I'm good. It's definitely a different perspective than everyone standing fighting over the last piece of pie. And, you know, we have good days and we have bad days. I think this whole thing of trying to be perfect is actually the problem. And the more we try to be perfect, it's going to be harder to meditate. Because meditating is when I have been successful at it, it's like falling back into nature.
Like you feel more grounded?
I feel more grounded, but I also feel more alive. But I also feel more intelligent. I also feel a little bit empowered. And maybe I have some superpowers.
Hmm.
Because actually, okay, sharks have a radar system, right? The scientists know all about it. Horses have a thing with their heart that goes, they can register a horse's frequency way beyond them. Their hearts are so powerful.
Hmm.
You don't think we're not energetic beings? Absolutely, we are.
Hmm.
When we learn how to turn on the light switch, which is meditation and chakra work and energy work. That's how I found it. And I do think some people do find it in religion. I'm not, I've met people that I'm like, I think they found something. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm not discounting that there's a line of a song, I'll see you there from one of the 77 paths to heaven.
Hmm.
And I love that. There's a lot of paths to get there. But it is good for you. I know I myself I needed an anchor. I need something for myself. I felt very abandoned and alone out in the world. So it helped to anchor into that divine and into that earth mother ship that we are all riding on. Like, wait a minute, if I break down all the elements of my being, I have all four elements from her in me. So I am part of the earth.
Yeah.
It kind of changes, I rather than thinking that I wasn't worth being on this planet, I'm like, no, maybe I'm no different than she is. So how could I not be meant to be here?
Hmm. Yeah.
Looking at it from that perspective, changing my perspective helped me to have more acceptance and self-worth.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about not beating yourself up when you don't have a good meditation, because I tend to do that sometimes when I would sit and then like,
But
and I
then,
feel
but
like
then you,
I
but
was
then you create a
unproductive.
resistance to meditation.
Yeah.
That's how we create resistance comes from frustration.
Yeah.
Resistance comes from a lot of times either us beating ourselves up or somebody else has beat us up over it. I've been afraid of showing my face because my mom would backhand me for bragging. So I was afraid if I put my face out there, that's what it was. I was extremely resistant to doing what I'm called to do.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
conditioning. So we can't beat ourselves up if we can meditate or not. We've made the effort. We practiced that day. We
Hmm.
give ourselves a gold star for showing up. If we don't be our own cheerleader, who are we going to find to do it? And the thing is we've all sit there and tried to whip it out of our. I used to get the hammer to myself and beat the holy jeepers out of me with
Mm.
that hammer. And you know what? It didn't get me anywhere. It got me stuck in resistance
Mm.
and angry. But when I started having compassion for myself and realizing you're human today, so and so hurt your feelings and you haven't processed it fully, or or this happened or that happened, and so maybe I need time to process and then I can come back and meditate. Sometimes I need to go ahead and vent,
Mm.
and then I can relax.
Yeah.
But whenever you do it from that way, rather than just beating yourself up, you can actually kind of see how you need to nurture yourself. It was like, okay, I had some insomnia last night because I was exposed to some chemicals and it makes my brain hyperactive. So I wasn't able to sleep last night. And there for a minute, I was really beating myself up because I was tired. I wanted to sleep. And so I got caught in that frustration a little bit. And I realized I was beating myself up for an injury. The things we've been conditioned to. And instead I turned it around and I started sending that loving, healing energy to my brain. And I didn't necessarily go to sleep because it is what it is, but I was way more peaceful and I got rest. I didn't get any rest when I was beating myself up. I was getting all angst and all. But when I looked at myself, whoa, this is an injury. That you're not to fault for this. You need to nurture and love yourself back into it. And I think that we really do need to learn how to be our own best friends and to love ourselves the way that we want. It's not even about being what we want to be loved. We actually need to be able to love ourselves, to give ourselves what we need. Because most times we are, in some ways, all of us, it's like we're constantly putting ourselves in timeout and, punishing ourselves like nonstop. Well, yeah, my fourth grade teacher did that, but I really liked my fifth grade teacher. She actually did it by being nice to me and bringing out my good things. But the fourth grade teacher told me she hated me, and I got stuck. But the fifth grade teacher saw me. So what are we going to be to ourselves? Are we going to be the ones that hurt and literally caused ourselves some abuse? Or are we just going to take that and just keep? They don't need to do it for us anymore. We can do it. Just keep abusing ourselves. That's kind of how I look at whenever I beat myself up now and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's the old way. I'm going to come back into love. I'm going to come out of fear. Life is scary enough. I don't need to add to that. When I had these migraines and some of these reactions, that's scary enough. I do not need to inflict more of it on myself. I think that when I had the 1.5 year migraine, I learned to talk to myself in a much nicer way because I literally couldn't take any more pain, even from myself, even self-inflicted. My nervous system had had enough. And I still have days that I fall. I mean, it's a rut. I put the cleachy in it, but sometimes it's not packed in good. It might take a little bit more work. But,
Yeah.
I can sit there and beat that dirt road up, but it's just going to get rougher and rougher and rougher if I don't do a little bit of work to smooth it out.
Yeah.
So I
So
do.
true.
It takes effort. It takes choice to choose to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's very true because a lot of times we're self-deprecating. We say we're not, why am I so stupid? Why did I do that kind of thing? And yeah, it
A
doesn't
lot of
help.
times our caretakers did that, and they didn't do it to abuse us. They thought that it was just an old way of doing things that's not working in this paradigm.
Yeah.
I try to remember that because it did work in their day. That's why they regurgitated it.
Mm.
It's just not working in our day because our day is not as dense. That's another thing. Some of us have been doing our work on this planet, not just me, but the veil is lifting, like it or not. It's not as dense as it was at one
Yeah,
point.
it just feels like people are kind of getting their power back. Feel like,
I've actually seen it on social media. People are calling it the Great Awakening. It is happening. And we are going to be able to come into that age of Aquarius that when we listened to that song, we all really wanted it to happen. I don't think there are people, I think, that get off on war, and we're just not going to deal with that. I think most of us really don't want to live that kind of world anymore.
well, that's why I think that if women were to rule the world, we wouldn't have wars.
But we have to actually deprogram ourselves first. If we are still in a realm of beating ourselves up and punishing ourselves into submission and into perfection, we're not going to be very good leaders. I think we're going to lead people right back into the same society that we are in today. So I think the first part of this is, at least healing codependency is having self-worth and self-value and not beating yourself up and being the abuser to your own self. And I think a lot of us are stuck and I was stuck in a really bad cycle of self-abuse like that. So I had to really, 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 really work at it because it had been going on so long that came way more natural than being my own cheerleader and my own friend. But somewhere in there, I turned the tables, and it's more so this way now. Not all, but definitely, the percentages have changed.
Well, there's lots of things that's happening right now that triggers us, right? So that we can work on those
Exactly. I was
areas.
going to say it triggers us, but it actually triggers us into our own healing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think so. Yeah. Gives us the incentive to do
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But then that kind of comes back to like self-awareness, though. Once you realize what the triggers mean, then you can kind of work on it, right?
But you're still making a choice to do it consciously rather than continuing the unconscious cycles.
Right.
So it's still making a choice. It's still a perception, a way
Hmm.
to perceive things.
Yeah.
And it's usually from a bigger picture. A lot of times we've got the magnifying glass and we're looking at every little bitty flaw. And yeah, I mean, I used to couldn't hardly look in a mirror because the only thing I could see was my flaws. I couldn't see I've got pretty eyes. I couldn't see them. And back on okay, we didn't talk much about attachment, so we probably are going to do another one, but it did come back in. I think, I noticed whenever I came back from Vietnam for the killing fields, I know it happened at the killing fields. I know it did because I could feel the frequency of it. Um, but I would look in a mirror and I felt like I was ugly. When you're in that low frequency, your perception is dense.
It takes a lot of work to raise our vibration, though.
Yeah. But since I raised my vibration, I noticed I had pretty eyes. And I don't mean it, people really beat up the ego. You have to kill the ego. You cannot kill your ego. It's like, oh, go ahead and beat yourself up for not being able to meditate. You have to love your ego into submission. Your ego is the 4-year-old that was abandoned and was neglected and wasn't fed a meal, and of course it's acting out. So who's going to provide for it and nurture it the way that it needs to, so that way it can heal and come back into alignment with our being? We cannot force our ego into coming into alignment with our enlightenment. We can't. We have to love it and nurture it in, because it's our inner child. It's suffering. Are you going to beat up a dog that just got run over by a car? Or are you going to take it and love it, or put it out of its misery? At least you're not going to just watch there and get a hammer and beat it up some more. That's what we do to ourselves. And when we are kinetic in that way, a lot of attachments can come to us. I've seen people with so many attachments, you can't get to the person anymore. It does happen. There's is fault what we would consider, we even learned about it at one time, but false mental illness. And it's that our own attitude was so deep and so dark that we're in such a pit, and everything just like it has attached to us. We have to start reaching for the light. Because what happens to the darkness when you flip a switch? It's gone. It's literally, we have to be the ones to go and grab the light and bring it in. If we want to heal, we can nurture the darkness too. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And I know, because I've done it. I take responsibility now for my attitudes, even when they're bad.
Mm.
So-and-so didn't do that to me. I took it wrong. Or I didn't let it bounce off, or, I absorbed somebody else's baloney. No matter what, they didn't do it. I did it. I do take responsibility and I'm not saying I don't ever have attitudes. I still have attitudes, but I take responsibility for them now. I don't just say, oh, that's what's happening to me. I do look at it now as, oh, this is a choice.
So by doing that, are you talking about like reacting or not reacting to somebody did?
Absolutely, because if I make my own choice, then it's easier to respond. If I don't make a choice, then I come from a reactive, triggered state. And yes, that still happens. I came out of a lot of trauma, so I've definitely got some triggers. But because of that, I can see both sides though too, in it now. I've done enough work that I can see both sides now. And not one of them is good or bad. It's not like that. That's such an old way of looking at it. It just is more what it is in a practical sense. But when I don't judge it like that, then I'm not so apt to come up with the hammer and beat myself over the head with it too. I was my own worst enemy for a really long time. I had a very hypercritical inner being.
I think most of us have that.
It has come from conditioning.
Yeah.
It's 100% developed through our conditioning, where we started this conversation. It actually starts healing. You chase yourself around the corner and develop resistance when you beat yourself up. Whenever you treat yourself with love, you actually start making breakthroughs and ahas, and that lover's card. I just thought of the lover's card. To me, that's what the lover card is talking about. More so than relationship. It has a lot to do with our relationship with ourselves, which completely changes how we relate to other people. If we don't have compassion for ourselves, we have an empty cup, and we ain't got anything to give to anybody else.
Yep. Exactly. All right. I think that's a good note to end on.
I think so too. I think the whole conversation came full circle.
Yeah.
That's the reason I love to channel spirit, because it always oh, yep. They always top it off with a little cherry at the end.
All right. Well, thank you for spending time with us today, and see
feel
you guys on the next podcast.
And feel free to join the conversation. You can find me at my website, syndicate.com. You can find me on any of the social medias. If you see this on YouTube, leave a comment, or any of the things that allow you to leave a comment, please join the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. We want to hear what we want to know what you guys want to talk about.
I definitely seek a more interactive experience, not just with me and you, but what are people needing to hear? I know for myself, I was a seeker, and there were certain things it had happened. The spiritual phenomenon had happened, but there wasn't anything in my world to explain it. I needed to hear. So I would like if people spoke up. What do you want to hear about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.
Have a good one.
Good one.